He was just walking down the street, nothing unusual, no trouble, just a man living his life. But today, something was different. Eyes followed him, doors closed a little too quickly, whispers floated in the air. Every step he took felt heavier, as if the world was judging him before he even spoke. And then, in a split second, everything changed. What happened next wasn't just about him, it exposed a harsh reality that millions face every day. This is his story, and it will shock you. It was an ordinary afternoon. Marcus had just finished his shift at a local grocery store and was heading home along the familiar streets of his neighborhood. The sun was high, casting sharp shadows on the sidewalks, and the city hummed with the usual rhythm of life, cars honking, children laughing, vendors calling out their daily specials. To anyone else, it looked like a normal day, but for Marcus, these streets carried an invisible weight he had felt all his life. He adjusted his backpack and tried to focus on the small joys, birds chirping overhead, the smell of fresh bread from a nearby bakery, but subtle glances and hurried steps told a different story. People would cross the street, clutch their bags a little tighter, avert their eyes, or whisper just loud enough to make him notice. He'd grown used to it, learned to move quickly, smile politely, and avoid confrontation. Still, each incident left a lingering ache, a quiet reminder that, in their eyes, his skin defined him more than his humanity ever could. As Marcus walked past the corner store, he noticed a small crowd gathered around a man yelling, and a police cruiser idling nearby. Something about the scene felt off, an undercurrent of tension that made his chest tighten. He had no idea that this routine walk home, so familiar and ordinary, would soon spiral into a moment that would test everything he believed about safety, fairness, and justice in the world he thought he knew. Little did Marcus know, the events about to unfold wouldn't just affect him, they would leave everyone who witnessed them questioning what they thought they understood about race, bias, and humanity itself. Marcus's footsteps echoed against the pavement as he approached the small crowd near the corner store. At first, he tried to convince himself it was just a regular disagreement, an argument over money, a lost pet, anything but what he feared. But as he drew closer, the air thickened with a tension he couldn't ignore. Voices rose, not in conversation, but in accusation. People glanced at him briefly, then quickly looked away, as if their eyes alone could erase the sight of his skin. A man in a suit, standing near the edge of the crowd, muttered under his breath, and Marcus caught a fragment, "Not here, not now." The words didn't matter, what mattered was the feeling they carried. He felt eyes piercing through him from every direction, weighing him, judging him, predetermining guilt for crimes he hadn't committed. He tried to walk past, head down, heart racing, but a hand suddenly grabbed his shoulder. "Hey, you there!" The voice was sharp, demanding, leaving no room for hesitation. Marcus froze, his mind spinning. He knew the world could be dangerous in moments like this, but he hadn't expected it to be so close to home. People began to step aside, murmuring among themselves, some recording with their phones, others whispering warnings. The uniformed officer behind him didn't ask questions, there was no conversation, no reasoning. Just a command, and the implicit threat that one wrong move could escalate everything. Every step Marcus took felt heavier than the last. Memories of past encounters, the whispered slurs, the suspicious glances, the times he had been overlooked for opportunities because of the color of his skin, poured into his mind. The crowd's attention felt like a spotlight, exposing him, isolating him, and amplifying the fear that had settled into the corners of his everyday life. Then came the sudden movement, a push, a shouted order, and Marcus realized this wasn't just about misunderstanding or coincidence. This was systemic, almost choreographed, a display of power and prejudice he had only read about in stories or seen on the news. And just as he thought he might escape the intensity, a shout from someone in the crowd froze him in place. "Watch him. He's the one." Time seemed to slow. Phones lifted, eyes widened, and the world narrowed down to a single moment that would define everything. Marcus's mind raced. Should he run? Should he plead? Should he remain calm? Each choice carried a weight he had never felt before, and he understood, this wasn't just a personal encounter anymore. This was a moment that could either destroy him or expose the raw, uncomfortable truth about the society around him. The officer's hand hovered near his holster, a silent warning that the next move could change everything. Marcus's heart pounded so hard it felt like it could shatter his ribs. He had done nothing wrong, yet the crowd's murmurs, the pointed fingers, and the flashing cameras made it clear, in this moment, innocence didn't matter. Every muscle in his body screamed to flee, but the weight of fear pinned him in place. "Step aside, now," the officer barked, his voice slicing through the tension like a blade. Marcus's mind raced, memories of past injustices flashing in rapid succession, stories he'd heard, news headlines of people like him, lives upended in seconds simply for existing. The crowd's attention had transformed into judgment, strangers had become witnesses, and some, participants. A sudden shove from behind nearly sent him sprawling. Panic surged, a wave so intense it blurred the world around him. He could see the anger, the confusion, the prejudice etched into every face. One wrong reaction, any reaction, could escalate into violence. Marcus's pulse thundered in his ears. Then, in the midst of the chaos, a single figure stepped forward, a woman from the crowd, calm but resolute. She raised her hands, not in confrontation, but in reason. "Stop. Look at him. He hasn't done anything." Her voice cut through the noise, a spark of humanity piercing the oppressive tension. Phone still recorded, but eyes began to shift. The intensity in the officer's stance wavered. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Marcus felt the shift, small but undeniable, the realization that courage, even from strangers, could alter the narrative. In that suspended moment, he understood the fragility of perception, the power of bias, and the possibility of change. Yet, the threat hadn't fully vanished, the danger was still real, still present. The question lingered, would justice prevail, or would prejudice dictate the outcome of this day? Marcus finally stepped back, his body trembling, but he was unharmed. The tension in the air slowly dissipated as a few onlookers whispered apologies, and the officer lowered his hand, seemingly reconsidering the situation. What had started as an ordinary walk home had transformed into a confrontation that exposed the raw, unfiltered reality of racial bias, how quickly fear and assumption could cloud judgment, even in a public place. As he continued home, Marcus couldn't shake the weight of what had happened. The fear, the humiliation, and the awareness of how easily a life could be endangered because of skin color pressed on him. Yet, amidst the dread, a small spark of hope had emerged, proof that courage, compassion, and speaking up could make a difference, even if just for a moment. This encounter was not an isolated incident, it was a mirror reflecting the experiences of millions who navigate a world where prejudice often precedes understanding. Marcus's story, though deeply personal, served as a reminder of a broader truth: the fight against racial injustice requires vigilance, empathy, and action from all of us. He realized that change doesn't always happen in headlines or sweeping legislation. Sometimes, it begins with a single act, a voice that refuses to stay silent, a person who sees humanity instead of color, a bystander who chooses intervention over indifference. These moments, small yet profound, ripple outward, challenging assumptions and inspiring awareness in ways that statistics alone cannot. Marcus reached his doorstep, pausing to breathe and reflect. The world hadn't suddenly become fair, but he had witnessed something powerful, the potential for humanity to rise above bias, if only briefly. And that fleeting hope was enough to remind everyone watching: prejudice can be confronted, injustice can be questioned, and the courage to stand for what is right can create change, even in the most ordinary of places. The question remains, in a world that often judges too quickly, will we choose to see people for who they are, or continue to be blinded by the color of their skin?